everyone! On Monday, we learned that there are a lot of different kinds of animals that live on the prairie. But we also learned that people live on the prairie too. Today, we're going to learn a lot about the people who live on the prairie and what life was like for them. We're going to start by learning about people who lived on the prairie a very long time ago. Remember, this means there's a time with no cars, no cell phones. Life is very different, okay? All right, while I'm reading, think of a super fact that you want to write about at the end of this video. The Great Plains is an area of prairie land in the middle of the United States. That's the green area right here. It is home to many different Native American tribes, the first people to live in the United States. About 150 years ago, more people began moving west to the Great Plains. So these people lived in the blue area right here, and they decided to move west. So they followed the blue squiggly lines over to the green area. The people that moved from the blue area to the green area were called pioneers because they were exploring land that was brand new to them. So remember, there are no cars during this time, so to travel to the Great Plains, pioneers packed everything they owned into a covered wagon. So this picture on the top is a covered wagon. A covered wagon was pulled by horse and oxen. Others might travel by a stagecoach. The picture on the bottom shows you a stagecoach. Often, many families would travel together so they could help each other on the long journey. Many pioneers came from big cities full of houses and shops. So look right here, this picture in the circle, we're seeing the big city where people lived. But the Great Plains where they moved was really different. It was an enormous area filled with grass and flowers and animals like the bison. The people living on the Great Plains had to figure out how to find shelter, water, and food. It was really different from where they were living. If you were a pioneer, how do you think you would build a house in the Great Plains? You'd have to get pretty creative, maybe with some wood. Let's find out. There weren't many trees in the Great Plains, so shelters couldn't be engineered using wood. So I was wrong, no wood. Let's find out what they used instead. Instead, people used the resources they did have as a solution, like dirt and animal skins. So some Native Americans built shelters out of dirt and grass called an earth lodge. So this picture right here is an earth lodge. Others built teepees. So they would stretch out animal skins, that's the white part of this teepee, along long branches to create shelters protected from the weather. The pioneers used dirt for their shelters too. They would dig up chunks of soil called sod. The picture in the oval will show you the sod. And they would stack the sod up like bricks to help them build a shelter. Then they would add dirt on top of the roof so that the heat would stay inside and they could stay nice and warm. So this right here is an example of a house that they built out of sod. Many prairie dwellers built their houses near creeks or streams so they could get drinking water. But what about food? Did the pioneers have grocery stores? No way. So what kind of food do you think they ate? Let's find out. The Native Americans and pioneers both hunted bison for food. The bison provided meat where they would hang it up and let it dry so it could last longer. They didn't have any refrigerators. So this picture in the middle is the bison meat that they were hanging up and they would let it dry out. Kind of like if you've ever had beef jerky before, that's a good example of a meat that got dried out. There were no more use for the bison. There were more uses for the bison too. They would use the skin and the fur because it was thick and warm. So the Native Americans and pioneers would use it to make robes and blankets. Also, the rich prairie soil was really good for growing food to eat. So the Native Americans would grow corn and beans and squash. They also grew wheat, which is the picture on the bottom corner right here of the brown stuff. And they could use the wheat to make bread. And they could raise cows, like the picture of this cow right here, because the cow was good for meat and milk. Not everyone on the Great Plains settled down in one spot. Cattle herders, often called cowboys or cowgirls, were needed to bring cattle from the prairie into the cities on the east. So they would often travel from place to place and never had a permanent house to live in or farm to grow their food. So right here is a cowboy and a cowgirl. Their job was to get these cows back to the city in the east so those people had food. These cowboys were moving so much that they didn't have a place to live. Cattle herders rode long distances on horseback. They needed shelter that they could carry with them and set up each night when they stopped to camp. They also needed food that wouldn't rot during their journey. I'm wondering, do you have any guesses on what kind of shelter they could create? They'd be living in a place like this picture. There's no big houses already there. What do you think they would eat? Let's read more. Cattle herders ate preserved food like dried beef and stale biscuits, similar to the pirates' hardtack. This is the kind of food that lasts much longer than fresh meat or bread. So here's the guy cooking over here. Then they built simple tents as for shelters at night, and they could just sleep under the stars. So it's kind of like just camping. Does this look like another prairie shelter that we talked about earlier? Does it remind you of the teepee? Long days on horseback led cattle herders to engineer new gear so their rides would be much easier. So the first problem that the cowboys had was they needed protection because the sun was really hot or it was really rainy. So here's what they came up with. They created a hat with wide brims to protect their faces from the weather. This is the first time, you guys, they used cowboy hats because they needed protection from the sun or the rain. Another problem that the cowboys had was they needed to carry food and supplies for long distances. So this right here is a picture of what they created. This is called a saddlebag. And a saddlebag goes on the side of a horse, and you can put all of your supplies in it. It's like a backpack that the horse can wear. Okay, here's another problem they had. The cowboys needed to get on and off the horses really quick. So here is a picture of a solution. This is called a stirrup. Can you say stirrup? And for a stirrup, you would put your foot on the little metal part, and it would give you like a little boost, like a ladder, so you could get on and off the horse quickly. The fourth problem that the cowboys had was they needed protection from dust because the horses or windstorms would kick up a lot of dust into their faces. So what the cowboys did is they wore bandanas. They'd wear it around their neck, and then when it got dusty, they could pull it up over their eyes, nose, and mouth so the dust didn't get in their face. They were pretty creative, those cowboys. Another thing cattle herders did to make the long trips easier and more fun was to sing songs. So they'd sing on their journey. Imagine this. You were on the prairie right now. You're a cowgirl or a cowboy, and there are two friends with you. And you have been riding for months and months and months. You're camping at night. You're riding your horse. What kind of things do you think you're going to see? Oh, I think I might see a lot of bison, a lot of stars at night. What do you think you'll hear? I think I might hear my friends singing. I think I might hear food when we're trying to create our hardtack with bread. Singing wasn't just for fun, though, for the cowboys. It had a super important purpose. Cattle herders didn't want their animals to get scared. If they did, they might run away in a panic. That's called a stampede. So singing songs to the cattle would keep the animals calm. It's kind of like how we sing lullabies to babies to calm them down. That's why the farmers were singing to their cows. Along with their voices, a harmonica was the perfect portable instrument for a traveling cattle herder. I'm remembering that Joseph has a harmonica like this. He'd be the perfect cattle herder. When air blows through the holes of the harmonica, it causes the inside to vibrate and make a sound. Making music was a nice way to relax at the end of the day. Today, the Great Plains look very different than they did before. More people are living on the Great Plains now, and there are fewer open areas because there are cities and farms. Like this one right here. This is where we live. We live in Denver in those big buildings in the background. But right outside of Denver, there's still some open land where the prairie is. Here's another example. This is a place called Nebraska. Nebraska now in Omaha is a big city, but there's still some prairie lands around it. It's changed a lot. Scientists are working really hard to protect prairie ecosystem. Huge areas of land, like the American Prairie Reserve, have been set aside to protect the homes of the wildlife and the plants that live there. Although bison nearly went extinct from hunting, remember, extinct means there's no more left in the whole world. Now they're not even endangered, so there's a lot of bison left now, which is great. We protected the bison, and now they're not going to go extinct anymore. What do you think these prairie lands are going to look like in 100 years? Do you have any guesses? I wonder if there'll be even more buildings. All right, here are some things we learned about today. These words are really great words for you to include in your summary. So here is a Native American. Native Americans were the very first people to live in the Great Plains. Here's a map of the Great Plains. It's in the middle of the United States. People moved from the east to the Great Plains. Here's an example of an earth lodge, and then down here is an example of a teepee. I'm remembering that these are the two types of shelters people made because they had not a lot of resources and needed a home. Here's wheat. What do you remember about wheat? Oh, I remember now. The wheat grows on the prairie and we can use wheat to turn into bread. What about bison? Why are bison so important? You're right. They used to hunt. The pioneers would hunt the bison, and the bison could be used to make blankets or jackets for their fur. And then the inside with their meat, they could use to dry out and eat. What about a stirrup? Why do we use stirrups? Yeah, you're right. A stirrup is a tool that helps the cowboys get on and off the horse. What about a bandana? Why were bandanas important for the cowboys and cowgirls? Oh, the bandanas protected their face. If a dust storm came, they would pull their bandana up so the dust wouldn't get in their eyes. And last, what about a covered wagon? Why didn't the pioneers drive a car? There were no cars. They had to drive a covered wagon instead, and horses and oxen would pull it. All right, take a good look at these pictures on the glossary. When you think you have a super fact that you're ready to write, go ahead and watch the writing video and get ready to write.